Are you failing your real estate exam because of vocabulary, not understanding them? Well, let me help you understand the vocabulary, because I do go into a little bit extra detail because the questions are brief and so are the answers. And sometimes it's hard to choose. So stay tuned with Wow Lillie Handy with YouTube Agent Prep, coming to you from San Antonio, Texas. So here we go. All right, so we are starting today with steering. Oops. I'm giving you the answer. So you got to define steering. What is that? I think we maybe mentioned it yesterday. So it is directing buyers based on protected characteristics. So buyer agents are the ones that would be steering buyers that are looking to purchase properties, and they're steering them like cattle or animals to an area that they think their ethnic group is, and that is illegal. Okay, we cannot do any steering. Our job, our fiduciary, is to help all clients and be transparent with them and not think about ourselves and just a commission. So redlining. What is redlining? Welcome, whoever is just joined. Hey, type your name on the chat comment so that I know who it is. So redlining, it's an illegal refusal to lend in specific neighborhoods. So that applies to lenders who don't want to loan money to people in certain neighborhoods. That again is illegal. Capitalization rate. This is used predominantly for investment properties. It is a rate used to determine value based on the net income. So net income is collecting all the gross income from the rents and subtracting the property management, maintenance, advertising, property taxes, insurance, deducting all that from the gross income, which leaves then the net income. And net income is used to determine a price on a property by using a capitalization rate. There is a formula for that, which I'm not touching base on today. Cash flow, money, 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 coming, coming, coming. So it's income remaining after expenses are paid. So that is the cash flow. So we talked about here capitalization rate. And so it's based on net income, which is considered then the cash flow after all expenses are paid. Contingency. There is a condition that is with the contract before it can close, a condition that must be met for contract to be proceed. And this is a condition that the buyer is requesting. It could be that they have to sell their home first, or they need a longer period of time to get the earnest money in. So the earnest money can be contingent on a promissory note, but it has to be delivered with a certain number of days. Cloud on title means there's something that is messing up the title to where a seller cannot close. It could be liens on the property. It could be an issue with the name on the property. You know, people that get divorced or get married, there is a name change. And this creates a cloud on the title when the title company does the the search. Okay, so the title company does the search on the property's ownerships. So chain of ownership. And so those create clouds on the title, just like, you know, we have a cloud in the weather. It covers the sun. We can't see through it. So these clouds on titles must be eliminated before a property can be conveyed to the buyer. So any problem or claim affecting clear title. And it could be boundary issues that came about on the survey. Constructive fraud. What is that? Unintentional misrepresentation that harms another. Now, let me point something out here. These vocabulary answers are quite brief. I go through additional explanation. However, this is what you may experience in the actual exam, is having answers that are very brief, okay? Or the question is a little bit hard to understand. The more vocabulary you know and understand, the better you'll be able to quickly answer a question. Actual fraud, they mean they had intent to do that. Intentional misrepresentation or deceit. They had a plan to deceive someone. And that could be the buyer or the seller. Subrogation. It is transfer of legal rights to recover debt. Transfer of legal rights to recover debt. And that's done by the bank, because who's recovering any debt? The lenders, right? Or a hard money lender, or an owner that provided owner financing to the borrower. So they may transfer those legal rights back to the bank for the bank to recover any debt. Subordination agreement. It's an agreement to change lien priority. So as I mentioned yesterday, there could be a first loan, there could be a second loan, and the first lender must approve for a second lender to provide money to the borrower. If there's not enough equity, that lender is not going to allow that. And many primary lenders don't want to have another loan involved, because if the borrower defaults, now there's different loans that have to be taken care of. And the primary lender, they don't care about all the other loans on there, all the other liens. They care about getting their money. They are the primary after property taxes. Property taxes are first in the list of priority liens. And then after the property taxes comes the primary lender, second junior lender, and other types of liens. Truth in Lending Act, TILA. Federal law requires disclosure of loan terms. And this is the lender that is providing the loan terms and disclosing all the specifics, all the fees that a borrower has to pay in order to get that money to purchase a home. RESPA, Real Estate Settlement Protections Act. So law regulating settlement procedures and preventing kickbacks. So as you can see right here, this question doesn't give you what RESPA stands for. You may be asked on the exam, or it may be something like this that doesn't give. So you need to know, what does RESPA stand for? Because you could get a question that says, what does RESPA mean? What does it stand for? Real Estate Settlement Protections Act prevents from any kickbacks. And who are the kickbacks to? Could be lenders, realtors, title companies, anyone that is involved in the transaction to a sale and purchase agreement. CERCLA. So CERCLA has to do with contamination. Oops. Federal law dealing with hazardous waste liability. So CERCLA stands for, what did I say yesterday? It stands for Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation and Liability Act. So comprehensive environmental response, right? It's dealing with hazardous waste liability. So it has to do with the environment, right? So it's a comprehensive, all-inclusive type of act that has environmental response, any compensations, and any liability. Escrow. There's different types of escrow. Escrow can be the individual third party that is taking care of the closing, handling all the funds. They're a neutral third party. They don't represent one party over the other. And they handle all the documents, and they put any escrow money as the earnest money into a trust fund. Escheat. If an owner does not have a will, then it goes to the government. Even though the property was promised to somebody else, that somebody else does not get it because it was not written in a will or a trust. Fee simple, defeasible. So ownership with conditions that can terminate ownership. As I mentioned yesterday, wealthy people contribute land, but they want it to be used for a library, for a school, or a city park, or a hospital. If those conditions are violated, then the owner will terminate that contract and get the property back. So it reverts to the original owner. Variance, it's a change on the property. It's permission to deviate from the zoning regulations on a city lot or a county. A county zoning is very light. You can almost do just about anything, but not totally. It depends on what state, but it has less restrictive zoning. The city is the one that has major zoning, and they have a planning department that takes care of listening to variances with their adjustment board and informing all neighbors that could be impacted by that change, by that deviation from the zoning regulation. A non-conforming use is a property that already existed before the city or the county changes the zoning. So that property owner or commercial property owner, if the area was changed to residential, that store can stay there. However, should it be sold or burned down or have a major loss, then the non-conforming use, it is no longer grandfathered in. So a non-conforming use can be that the property is grandfathered in. And but once it's destroyed, it has to go to the new zoning rules. Specific performance. You will see this on all the contracts, listing agreements, contracts to buy and sell. And each party has to specifically perform an activity. So it's a court order to compel contract fulfillment. I mean, that's very invasive. I mean, not invasive. It doesn't really tell you a lot, a court order to compel contract fulfillment. Well, it's actually in the legal contract, a listing agreement, or a purchase and sale agreement like the 1-4 or commercial or land or condos, townhomes, any type of property that is being sold has a section where it says both parties have to perform. If both parties do not perform, like the seller has to provide access to the property, they have to follow through with the sale of the property, and the buyer has to perform. Now, and one condition that they may not be able to perform is that the lender did not give them final approval. Then a lender notice has to be provided stating that the borrower cannot get approved for that loan. So each party has to perform specific conditions. So court order to compel contract fulfillment is kind of questionable as far as trying to understand that. That's why you use Google or AI or ChatGPT to give you a better explanation. Novation. So it is replacing a contract with a new one. So it's a contract that is changing or was rejected or was countered, not rejected, but it was countered. And there is a new condition that was requested by the seller or by the buyer. Then it becomes a new contract. So it is replacing a current contract that both seller and buyer did not agree on because there was a counter offer. So then they have to review it again. The buyer has to decide whether they want to follow through with it, and the seller, or they request certain things being taken. But it is a new contract replacing the current one. And let me go back. It's not like having to write a new contract. It's that the existing contract that was presented for an offer, the seller didn't accept. So they counter. Let's say they want more money, or they don't agree with the earnest money that was provided by the buyer, or they don't agree with how long it's going to take to close, or it's closing too early. So those cause the contract to be considered, it's being replaced by a new one that now both buyer and seller have to agree on or counter again. Option contract. This contract has an option which gives the party the right to buy property within a set period. So in a buyer-seller resale or brand new, a buyer can request for inspections. So when an offer is made, the buyer is going to provide earnest money, and it doesn't have to be cash. Okay, it can be a promissory note. It can be something that they exchange. It doesn't have to be cash. The second thing that comes in the beginning of the contract is an option period where they want to do their inspections, their due diligence. Okay, so that would give the party the right to buy properties within a set period of time. And so it could be 5 to 10 days. At that period, their earnest money is not at risk, and they can decide to terminate the contract prior to the expiration at 5:00 p.m. of that contract. Or an option contract could be with a lease option to purchase type of contract. They agree to a lease of a property now with the option to purchase it within 6 months, a year, or 3 years, whatever the term is set. Right of first refusal, or a lot of times we call it first right of refusal. Somebody is given the right to have a first choice on that property. Right to purchase before priority is offered to others. So an owner will sell a property, but they say, well, before I sell this property, I'm giving my neighbor or my relative a right to make an offer on the property. If that does not work out, then this contract that was presented will go into first place. But they are informed that there is a first right of refusal with somebody else. And the other thing that could happen with a first right of refusal, if the buyer says, hey, I have to sell my property before being able to purchase this one. So the seller will say, okay, I'll agree to it, but you'll have up to 72 hours of an opportunity to perform. Otherwise, so this is my first right of refusal. You have 72 hours. Otherwise, you're going to lose the opportunity or your position in purchasing this property. So then that first right of refusal goes to the new offer that came in. But that buyer is given the first right to refuse to go through with the purchase or to perform. And performing would mean they've got to have the cash to close now, because more than likely the lender is not going to be able to close. Okay. And one example is about 72 hours for the buyer to perform. They have the first right to refuse not being able to purchase or refuse any other offer coming in. A special warranty deed. I mentioned that there are different types of warranty deeds: general warranty deed, a regular warranty deed, a special warranty deed, and a quick claim deed. So a special warranty deed guarantees title only during the grantor's ownership. So I mentioned that yesterday, that some individuals may only own the property for 1 year, or a lender may have foreclosed on the property, took the property over, and now it is bank owned. So they don't know the history on that property. They're only going to provide a special warranty deed for the period that they owned it. The same with an executor, okay, or an administrator that is put in place by the court when someone passes away. They typically provide special warranty deeds. A general warranty deed so provides the strongest title guarantee. And so the title company can do a search throughout the whole history of the property. It may take a little bit extra money to do that, but they do the search not only for the current owner, but for the prior owner. So that's a general warranty deed. A gross lease. Is it gross? No, not necessarily. But a gross lease is where the tenant pays for the rent, landlord pays property expenses. So the landlord is paying for their mortgage, their property taxes, the insurance, and for maintenance. The lessee, right, the one receiving the property to lease, they only pay the rent. Okay, so that is a gross lease. A net lease. There are net leases and triple net leases, different types of leases, and these are commercial. So the tenant pays rent plus sum of all expenses. So this is paying a rent. It could be a percentage of expenses. It depends on what lease that was created. So remember, there are net lease. They're paying a few more expenses, and then a triple net lease, which would include other expenses like property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. A percentage lease, I just mentioned. So the tenant pays a percentage of the business income as rent. So some businesses, they could have high months where they make a lot of money. They could have low months. So they will have a base rent plus a percentage that they pay from the income that they produce each month. So tenant pays a percentage of business income as rent. And so typically there's a base rent, which is small. And then the majority of the rent to the landlord has to do with the production of income or sales. A constructive eviction. Constructive eviction. It is the tenant forced to move due to landlord neglect. So if the home was damaged by a hurricane, a flood, or the water heater, or pesticides or something like that, and the tenant can't live on there because the owner has to provide a habitable home. And if the owner, the landlord, didn't do that, they have negligence. So the tenant forced to move due to landlord neglect. So the tenant is choosing to move because of the landlord not taking care of their responsibility to provide a habitable apartment, condo, home, whatever it may be, business. So that is a constructive eviction where the tenant is taking the act to move out. Actual eviction. Landlord illegally removes the tenant. So here the landlord has to file an eviction notice, but prior to the eviction notice, they must give the tenants a notice, post it on their door, mail it, email it. Every state has their own landlord-tenant laws, and the majority, they protect the tenant. And many tenants that are tenants for most of their life, they know all the details. So landlord has to be on top of it and follow the rules to evict somebody. If they don't dot all the I's, cross all the T's, the local jurisprudence court will throw it out and they have to start all over again. So actual eviction is where the landlord is legally removing the tenant. Hypothecation is using property as collateral without giving up possession. So a borrower is giving their purchase of the property, okay, as collateral to a lender or a home financer, owner financing. So the property is being used as collateral without the owner, the new owner that's buying it, giving up possession. Promissory note. I promised to pay you. In the old days growing up, if we owed somebody money, we're like, okay, I'm going to write what I owe you on this little note, and it states I'm going to pay it to you within a certain date. Well, now there are more detailed promissory notes, and they can also be used in a contract if the buyer doesn't have the money right now, or they're out of state and they're going to deliver it with certain days. So it is a borrower's written promise to repay a loan. And so promissory notes are not recorded in the courthouse. The warranty deed is recorded. The deed of trust is recorded. The promissory note is not. And that describes what the promissory note is dealing with. The loan amount, the payment amount, the interest, okay, the years, all that is included in the promissory note, and that is not public information to the world. That is between the lender and the borrower. Sublease, substitute somebody else for the original, right? So tenant rents property to another tenant. And this has to be agreed upon on the primary lease. When that tenant ends up wanting to have a lease with the landlord, and they're going to say, well, hey, you know what? I may have to relocate because of my job. So do I have the right to sublease the property? And that is up to the landlord to do that. However, the responsible party is still the primary tenant if they sublease it. So that new tenant has to make sure they pay, or it falls back on the original, because the contract, the lease agreement was with the original tenant. So assignment, is that a homework assignment? Yeah, that's normally what I let all of you know. Study, study, study vocabulary so that you pass the exam. It's not the only thing that you need to pass the exam, but it's one of the primary things. So it is a transfer of lease rights and obligations to another. A lot of wholesalers and real estate investors, they will tie down a property, put it in a contract, kind of like two realtors doing business. Okay, you have one realtor representing the seller, another realtor representing the buyer. However, sometimes one realtor represents one client and facilitates the contract writing to the other one. Well, in an assignment, if an owner is selling it on their own, or it's actually listed with a realtor, this investor will present an offer to the owner and say, may assign this contract, may or may not assign this contract. So the contract, they're asking for it to be assignable. And so they'll say, so Joe Blow, Joe Smith, and or assignee. And they don't know who the assignee is yet because they're looking for a buyer. And so a wholesaler, when they find the assignee that the seller has agreed, then that contract is assigned to a new person, and that assignee is the one that closes with the seller, and the wholesaler receives a fee similar to what us as realtors, but they don't have to be licensed because they are not representing anyone. They're actually putting a contract. They're acting as the buyer, and then they assign their contract to somebody else, another buyer. Okay, I need to take a sip here. A universal agent. There's different types of agents, okay, that we are. Our typical is being a typical realtor that represents sellers and buyers. But there are other agents that represent other parties. So a universal agent with broad authority, like general authority, broad authority, not specific to one property, an agent with broad authority to act on behalf of the principal. And who's the principal? The owner of the property, the owner of the apartment complex or condominium. So they work for the owner as a universal agent, and sometimes they're given a power of attorney in order to make decisions on that property, on that rental. But it's usually in a broader sense, and they provide all the documentation, but a typical property manager does not have this right. They can't go and get a loan on the property to help pay for expenses. But a universal agent will be given that responsibility from the owner. A general agent. So universal is like what all over the world, right? The universe. A general agent is an agent with ongoing authority, such as a property manager. If they don't have the authority of a universal agent to act on behalf of the principal up to the point of accessing loans or making major decisions. A general agent is going to go with the instructions of the owner on every step, have to get approval from the owners. Now, the owners will say, hey, I need you to rent these properties at certain price. You do the comparables and you let me know what they can rent. And they provide monthly reports or however often that owner wants them. But that's all they do. And they take care of getting the property maintained every time it vacates and bring somebody else in. The universal has a higher authority. As I mentioned many times, they may have a power of attorney to act in behalf of that owner. A special agent, well, that's like us. We are special agents. It's an agent hired for a specific task. So think of special, specific, deals with one transaction, such as a real estate transaction. So a special agent is dealing with a specific task, dealing with one real estate transaction. Probate. When does probate happen? Oh boy, when somebody passes away. Legal process of distributing a deceased person's assets. So if there could be a will, but there isn't a living trust, which specifies more direction on the will. If they only have a will, it's going to go to probate, and the judge has to provide judgments, making decisions on who gets the assets that were in the will. And if there's a living trust, then the living trust will specify more particulars about who gets what. So probate means it's got to go to the judge. Here comes the judge. Here comes a judge. Or there we go with the judge. Legal process of distributing a deceased person's assets. Zoning ordinance. Local regulations governing land use and structures. Every city has zoning ordinances, and they have a planning department. They have an adjustment board when people ask for variances. So the zoning restrictions are tighter within the city zone versus the rural areas. So in the urban areas, there's tight restrictions. And then whoever has a development, builders, contractors, that have subdivision, they have to meet all the zoning ordinance, but they can add stricter contingencies. Stricter regulations. Okay, they call those covenants and restrictions, where they say, well, we only want 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes that are brick, 2-story, sidewalks, 2-car garage, and it's going to be a fenced property. So those are tighter restrictions than the zoning ordinance, but they have to first meet the zoning ordinance. All right, we went through those pretty quickly. So, guys, in order to pass, if you don't know these words, you will fail the exam. I mean, some individuals are excellent at guessing at multiple choice questions. But as my title says, if you don't know these words and many, many more, you may fail the exam, or you will. Many people fail it because of vocabulary, and you'll have vocabulary in the national and the state exam. In fact, some of the questions, multiple choice questions, the answer is going to be just a vocabulary word, okay, that deals with certain concept. So anyway, I will stress again and again, also like prep agent Joe Juder stresses, know your vocabulary, okay? Please, it's crucial that you're learning a new language. If you're wanting to learn Italian, French, Greek, German, you've got to learn the basic words. So these are the basic works of real estate that you need in order to operate a real estate business. But first, pass your real estate exam. So as always, this is Lillie Hendy Dominguez coming to you from, or Wild Lillie Hendy, coming to you from San Antonio, Texas with YouTube Agent Prep. I am an active realtor in the San Antonio market. So remember, if you like this, oh, by the way, set a firm schedule. If you haven't passed the exam or you tried it once, create a schedule. Be consistent. Be strict with it. Let your family know that you're preparing for an exam. You may be required to do the whole last week before you take the exam. Study every day. Repeat a lot of the questions that you study over and over until you get comfortable with the concepts, with getting them right and being able to answer quickly. So, because I want you to become a realtor and build a business. And just for your information, there's about an 87% failure rate of students that pass their real estate exam. Make sure you research about real estate, what it really takes, because it's your business, not somebody else's. It's your business that you're going to manage. Talk to other realtors, talk to brokers, research on it, because you're making an expense for all these classes and preparing for it to pass the exam, to come and find out like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of work. And it is, okay? It is. I have been a major workaholic, and I'm not that quite major workaholic. So I'm now at the stage where I also want to help you because other people help me. So with that said, enough, okay? So I love you all. Should you like this video, hey, tap the like button, click the subscribe button, and also click the little bell so you get alerted every time I go live. My goal is to do these on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, maybe even Saturday for those that are getting ready to take the exam anytime soon. And I'm also creating videos to help you after you start your business. And if you're already a realtor and now preparing to become a broker, because I have been a broker in Oregon. So until next time, pass that exam. Catch y'all later. Bye. Love ya.